From the Virginia Mason Athletic Center, you're watching Training Camp Live, presented by Safeway, powered by Seahawks.com. Now, here's your host, Jackie Montgomery.
What's going on, 12s? Thanks for joining us this Sunday morning for Seahawks Training Camp Live, presented by Safeway. It's kind of a balmy day here, Sunday, so it's really feeling like we're getting close to football here, guys. All right, I'm Jackie Montgomery, your digital reporter for the Seattle Seahawks, and we have a slew of former players here with us today. We have Paul Moyer, former safety, Michael Bumpus, former wide receiver, and Colin Cole down at the end, former D-tackle, all for your Seattle Seahawks. Myself, former right guard. Yeah. I mean, as you can tell, for the Seattle Seahawks. But no, it's a good day, guys. We are talking about the first preseason game that the Seahawks had just this past Thursday against the Denver Broncos, where they got the win over the Broncos, and it was an exciting day to see how the coaching staff worked this one out. Normally, we're used to seeing some of the starters getting at least some work at that first drive of the game, that first series, actually. But that wasn't the case this time. The coaching staff wanted to change things up. They wanted to look at the players in a different kind of setup, if you will. And so we didn't see Russell Wilson at all in that first preseason game. We saw Geno Smith take the first half, Paxton Lynch take the second half, and then it was kind of a mix and match throughout the game as far as the line, both lines, and the players that they were working in and out. So first off, I want to hear what you guys thought of this game and what really stood out to you.
Well, the one thing that hasn't changed is Pete still wants to win no matter what you're playing, whether that's checkers or a preseason game. And you can watch him on the sideline, his enthusiasm and how he's coaching, that doesn't change. I thought kind of what we expected. You go from air, not doing a lot of hitting, to all of a sudden you're coming to a game where it's full speed. Denver had already played a football game. They were probably a step ahead of us that first series or two. But then they settled down, and I thought they got exactly what they wanted. They were looking for guys who they are hoping can make an impact on this team. That's, Barton, Marquise Blair, which a real deal. He's definitely going to be fighting for some playing time. So I think they got what they needed, just to get the speed of the game and get some of that rust off, and now they're here to clean up all the mistakes they made, and they had some mistakes in the game
Lots
too.
of penalties, 15 penalties just for the Seahawks. The Broncos had quite a bit too, so very sloppy from start to finish.
Yeah, and that's kind of what you expect when you have a bunch of young guys out here. It's their first game in the NFL. A lot of jitters, a lot of excitement. And like Paul said, they were just working on getting their flow and getting their rhythm. Even as coaches, they got to get used to calling their plays and getting to their zone as well. So it was fun to see a lot of the young guys get this time. And I think that's going to be the trend now going forward in the NFL. You're not going to put your $1 million investments out there. You're going to get some young guys out there, allow them to get into the groove and feel the speed of the game.
Absolutely. The biggest thing that I take away from the preseason game the other day is the fact that, just like Paul said, it started out a little bit slow, but then you started seeing people really get comfortable and get settled in, and we started seeing some special teams plays really start taking off, especially with Griffin, with Mingo, some of those guys that are really core special teams guys. I was surprised to see our man Austin Calitro play the entire game. He made a lot of plays in the game and played extremely well. Yeah. And a lot of the young rookies that obviously with these guys not out here hitting, not out here tackling, you kind of worry about whether or not what that's going to look like once the game starts. But everybody picked it up and played extremely hard, and it all showed on the field.
Yeah, like you mentioned, Calitro, one of the handful of guys that played the entire game. It was interesting to see how that rotation works. Some guys were in there for, it seemed like, every single snap, and then some guys, they were working, rotating at positions. But a good showing overall. I was really excited to see some of Paxton Lynch had a great night. Some of that new kid, Xavier Turner, who we're going to talk about him later on in the show.
Who?
What exactly?
The guy they picked up the day before.
The day, yes.
Yeah.
It was really impressive. But let's go over first off just a couple of injuries that we did get coming out of the game. Bo Scarborough, running back for the team, he saw some time in there, but he came out. Coach Carroll said that he hurt his hand on one of the plays, and so they needed to do some x-rays. Nothing is broken, but they just wanted to keep him out for that game. Geno Smith, Coach Carroll announced prior to the game that he was having a procedure on his knee to have a cyst removed, so they're not really concerned with anything there. They wanted to get this one game under his belt, but that's when we made a signing over the weekend because we need to kind of fill that backup quarterback spot with Geno Smith out for a little bit. And then the one that was the most disappointing from the game is watching George Fant go down. They said it's just an ankle sprain, so that's promising, but it was just a couple years ago where it was a preseason game that took him out for the year. So it's never fun to see a guy go down, especially in the preseason, but on the bright side, at least it's just this ankle sprain. Could be a lot worse.
Yeah, I think all in all, anytime you come out of a game where you haven't lost anybody for the year or half the season, ankle sprains are always tough. Every guy reacts to them different. This one was, as Pete said, a traditional ankle sprain. They were all traditional when I was playing, but now you got high ankle sprains and whatnot. So I thought that part was really good. I'll go off the one thing, why Calitro too. Part of it is just, injuries. We have a lot of veteran guys that, they want to make sure that they keep healthy. But man, I tell you what, he played really good.
Yeah.
And not just stat-wise. I think he had 5 tackles, maybe 6. But he had the one breakup on a third down slant. He had another one on a third down one as well. The only one I think he messed up was that 50-yard run. Both linebackers, kind of messed up on that one. But other than that, light years where he's been the last couple of years. So that's good. Again, just more depth, to rely on Taylor Barton, a rookie. You could do it, but you never know what you're going to get with a rookie. And even Taylor, as well as he's played in the practices, man, those first 3 or 4 plays, he was pointing around, but he really wasn't sure where to go. And then he settled into it, and he played like he did throughout this whole camp.
Yeah, I love the versatility that Calitro showed. You talk about that pass breakup. Running back motions outside, gets outside the number. Calitro runs with him. That's foreign territory for an LB. You got number 50-something. You don't want to be outside those numbers. But he broke on the ball, broke it up, and he's playing with confidence. He was the leader out there in that linebacker corps, and that's what they need out of a second guy, a backup. When KJ goes out, Bobby goes out, whenever they need a guy to step up, Calitro showed that he can handle it. And with Barton, you're right. Barton showed that he's still a rookie. You can look good out here. You can fly around, but when it's all said and done, you need experience, and he's going to get better and better with that experience. And not forcing him to go on and play right now and having a guy like Calitro is just going to make him even better down the line.
I agree. I think the biggest thing about that, taken away from the game, is the fact that you have to be versatile. You have to be able to learn all 3 of the positions when it comes to linebacker. All those guys that actually played between Barton and Calitro, I'm impressed with how much they were able to retain and how much they were able to really bring it to the field on Thursday and really just get after it. That's what these coaches want to see. They don't care about so much the small mental mistakes and some of that stuff when it comes to early preseason games, but when it comes down to it, how much are you flying around? How fast are you getting to the ball? How much are you running downhill and not thinking? Just like you were saying, Paul, pointing out certain things but not necessarily moving as quickly as you need to be. But you settle in, you get comfortable. And again, we can't lose the fact that Denver played in the Hall of Fame game just last week. So they already have some game experience where these guys are leaning more on last season to kind of get brought up to speed. So to be able to adjust and make those adjustments early in the game and really get into the groove of what the game was, it was impressive to see those guys go the entirety of the game and just ball the way they did.
So Calitro, as you mentioned, he had 5 tackles, which was a team high. Cody Barton also had 5 tackles to make that tie. What did you think of him? We only saw him for maybe a couple drives, so limited time seeing him. What did you think of his performance? And I also want to touch on Ben Burkervin, the other rookie that we drafted that a lot of people have been excited about.
Yeah, I think Taylor Barton was an easy one. Everybody was watching him. I was watching him, and I just wanted to see, did he, take that from the practice field to the game? And the first 3 or 4 plays, they were shifting, and his eyes were pointed right at the quarterback, and Calitro had to move him one time, and I go, oh, man, here it is, the pace of the game. He's nervous. And the 3rd and 1 play, I don't know what he was doing. It was just a lead play to our right through the B gap. Both linebackers messed up on that. He was 7 yards downfield. But after that, he got what he's been doing all through camp, and that's he's a really good, I call him a running back tackler, and that he can sense where that hole is, where the running back's going to make the cut. And you watched him, he made 4 or 5 really good tackles, and I thought he even got on a couple assists as well. So, and he covers well. There's some that didn't go on, they went unnoticed because they didn't throw it to him, but I watched him cover a tight end, running a little out route. He was right on it. So he's going to be a good player.
Cody Barton, guys. What did you think?
Did I say Taylor Barton?
No, me.
Cody Barton.
I was saying.
Cody Barton.
I think I said it, and then you said it, and so before we.
That's why I say just
before
Barton.
This train gets going, I just want to say Cody Barton. It's Sunday, y'all. We're still a little weekend hangover. But for you guys, what did you think?
Cody, initially I saw a guy who was trying to figure it out. He wasn't taking his run step. He was stuck in mud. He's watching it all go down, and they're getting guards on him. He doesn't know how to shed the block. And then as the game went along, now he's starting to key his reads. He's seeing the tackle block down. He's diagnosing run. He's dropping into his coverage. It just seemed like it slowed down a bit for him. And that's all it is. Again, man, you cannot replace experience with anything. These rookies, they look great. They look good on paper. They got good 40s. They're smart. But there's nothing like seeing an offensive line line up in front of you and try to diagnose it. That's all it is at linebacker. If you can diagnose the play, you have a chance. And as he gets older, as he gets more experience, as he studies film, as he learns himself as a player, what he's good at, what he needs to work on, he'll get better. But for his first showing, I thought it was great. He took some lumps, but he also made some plays.
I think it goes without saying how important it is for game experience like Michael was talking about. You can simulate all you want in practice. You can simulate out here in jerseys and pads and all that, but there's nothing like game speed. And so when game speed was in front of him, just like Mike was saying, you got to be able to adjust. You got to adjust your game. You got to move as quickly as you can. You got to get in and out. You got to be able to see the formations and see. There's a lot of things that linebackers have to see. It's not just making sure the guys up front are lined up. They got to make sure the guys on the back end, the guys at the corners, they got to make sure everybody's lined up and everybody's on the same page. So for him, as a rookie, to be able to go out there and just have a few plays where there were, kind of iffy movements and to kind of get into it and really rely on the defense, rely on the play calls that Ken Norton was putting down for him, and to really rely on that coaching, it was good to see that transition from being a rookie kind of deer in headlights type of look to a guy that kind of was getting comfortable in what he was seeing and reacting to what he was seeing, and that's what he was doing, was playing downhill.
As I say, what was impressive on that first drive, they get that 50-yard run on a 3rd and 1. Again, it was just poorly played. I think after that, they averaged under 2 yards a carry in the running game. And we had almost all backups in. They did too, but not their first drive. You take away that part, I go, that's pretty good. You go into a preseason game with young guys to hold another team to under 2 yards a carry, not bad. Again, not for the game. That take away the 50-yarder. It was pretty good after that.
Well, and just to touch on what you guys are saying, like you're saying, this game experience, obviously trying to diagnose these plays, but this is what you're just saying, Colin. This is the first time that they've actually finished out tackles, and Coach Carroll was saying in his press conference that is one of the biggest things that they're going to be looking for, is watching these guys finish these tackles, see how they do it, because they're not able to out here during training camp and on the practice field. And he said watching that aspect of the game might be more important than even the wins or losses. Obviously, that's just when it comes to preseason. Right. It's a much different mindset once the regular season gets here. But for this, it's all about getting those reps that they don't get to finish out on the practice field. Yep. All right, so guys, we touched on George Fant's injury when we were doing the injury report, and I'm just curious, when we look at the other side of the ball, the offensive line, we've talked so much about all the promising aspects of the offensive line and the depth that they have there. So when you consider an injury like this, we're hoping that it doesn't impact that depth so very much, because we've heard Dwayne Brown talk about the depth. We've heard Justin Britt, all the guys talk about how deep this offensive line is. But he was not only working as offensive line, he was out there at that tight end spot, getting in on different plays. Just they're using him a lot different ways. So how do you think that could impact the offensive side of the ball?
You know what? I think on the offensive line, it just makes somebody else have to step up. When a guy goes down, it's next man up. In the tight end room, you would think it changes things in the tight end room, but I don't think so, because he's not really a tight end. They use him at a tight end spot, but they're still going to rely on Van Nett, Hollister, and Disley. I think that just makes Van Nett have to play a little more, because he's the true blocking tight end we have in that room. Right now, I don't think it's a big deal. It's a legit ankle sprain. Like you said, Paul, they're all legit back in our day. So ice it, put it in a boot, and it gives a young guy another opportunity to step up. I think we can count on George Fant being there during the season. Now, a young guy has to step up. That tight end room stays the same, in my opinion. I don't think it changes too much.
I think the biggest change in the matter of scheme-wise is Schottenheimer obviously has to take away the extra offensive lineman in a lot of blocking schemes, because that's the guy that you want on the field, because that's the guy who has the most experience doing it. But ultimately, I think that your playbook only narrows by a little bit. It doesn't take away a whole lot. He's a guy that obviously when he gets healthy, he'll be that third offensive tackle when somebody else goes down. So I think it doesn't mess up a whole lot. It does give everybody else an opportunity to make sure that they know those schemes, the other tight ends that are expected to be out there. So it doesn't take away a whole lot. You just hope that he gets back in time for week 1, so that the full accommodation of the playbook is available. So we'll see how it all shakes out. And high ankle sprains, they're a little bit tricky. They're very tricky, especially for big guys. It's a tough thing to really see and how those guys will be able to respond from that. So it'll be interesting to see how it comes week one.
The nice thing is we've got time. It was the first preseason game. We're still about, a month away, I guess, from the opener. And, with technology and our trainers here, if there's a possibility to get him ready, they will. And if we can't have him for a game, he's a package guy, but he's important. Yeah, I mean, our running game changed when they went with that package last year, and there was just a nastiness about that. However, they took that on from a personal pride standpoint. So I want them back. Their teams are not built to stop the run. And when you got another 300-plus pound guy who's 6'5", 6'6", that's an advantage for the Seahawks.
Well, let's stick with the offense and the guy behind the offensive line, the quarterback. There is a lot of talk going into this game about the competition at that backup quarterback spot between Geno Smith and Paxton Lynch. And what were your first thoughts of what went down and who maybe had the better showing between the two?
Well, I think statistically, you're going with Paxton Lynch on that one. And he was fired up. It's his old team, a team that drafted him, that let him go. It gave up on him, basically. So there's some pride to that. And I didn't expect much from him. He played better than I thought he would. I think Geno was in a tougher spot in that he had all backups in the game. And Denver, you had Von Miller and, they're guys who can flat out rush the passer. I thought Geno, it was his first game in a while, and I thought he played like it. He wasn't real patient in the pocket. They had good protection at times. And he was sitting there, and he looked at his, target, or his primary, and he got away from it. He just all of a sudden he started to loop around and get out of the pocket. I didn't think he needed to. So, he's going to be out a few weeks. I think they trust Geno, so I don't think this is about. At least I think it's not about who the backup is. I think he is. But, if we can get Paxton Lynch, to play well, that's that much more confidence for the Seahawks coaches.
When you come in and you're going to be the starter and Russell Wilson's going to be the guy eventually, but you come in the game, you're the starter, there's a different kind of pressure that you play with. You feel like you have to press it. I got to make this play. I have to make this throw. And I think Geno kind of felt that pressure a little bit. I think Paxton, when you're sitting on the bench, you can watch it all go down. You kind of feel the game a little bit. You can come in with a little bit more confidence. And I think Schottenheimer showed confidence in Paxton Lynch. I think he opened up the playbook a little bit more for Paxton rather than he did for Geno. So Paxton looked good. His feet were nice. I remember during the week we were talking about him throwing off balance, not setting his feet. He seemed really calm and in control, and I think that's a testament to him coming off the bench, man. 6 man coming off the bench, you feel the game, you feel the flow, and I think that's what happened. And again, he was going up against 2s and 3s. He wasn't going up against their best guys. So there's a lot of things that affected that. End of the day, you got to go out and make plays. Geno took a step back. I think Paxton took a step forward and reintroduced himself to the league again. It was fun to watch him play.
I think when I look at the game as a whole, I really look at how in the beginning of the game, obviously, there's a lot of you as a quarterback. You have to set the tempo. You have to be the guy to kind of set the energy of the huddle of the offense as a whole. And the one thing that I felt throughout the game, throughout the first half, was that when Geno was on the field, he just seemed like he was moving a little bit slowly, just like we were talking about with these rookies, kind of with the deer in headlights type of look. It seemed like he had opportunities. I feel like Schottenheimer was doing a good job of trying to call plays to get him to get the ball out of his hands. At times, he just didn't do it, and I think that was probably one of the bigger factors in his play and his performance on Thursday than anything, was that he just kind of held on to the ball too long, and a lot of times kind of got himself in trouble doing so. With the offensive line only able to hold up for as long as they had to. I mean, especially when you're expecting quick passing game, you're not expecting for the quarterback to hold the ball. And a lot of times he got himself in trouble, tried to get out of trouble a couple times, but wasn't able to escape the rush. But, when the coordinator's calling certain plays to get the ball out of your hands and get them to the receivers and get them in a position where they can run, kind of like Paxton did in the second half, I agree with Mike when it comes to playing against second and third team players. Yeah. But it comes down to fundamentals. Are you getting to that drop? Are you getting to that third step drop and getting the ball out of your hand? Is it coming out when it needs to and getting into the hands of the people that really know how to run with it and are supposed to be running with it? Or are you trying to do too much? And that's kind of what I felt early on in the game. Paxton, when he came in the game, I felt like he was just really seeing the defense and seeing what was available to him and getting the ball out of his hand. And it seemed like the way that the offense was growing is more what he was comfortable with. more so than what it was in Denver.
You know, I was surprised with Paxton's legs and the feel for running, not just that he, something opened up, but the feel for him to take off. And I'm embarrassed I can't remember this, but what was it Geno Smith or Paxton Lynch when the 2 balls to DK Metcalf?
That's Geno.
And I'm telling you, to me, don't get me wrong, would have been nice catches. I expect Metcalf to make those. If he makes both those catches, he goes 5 for 9, 1 touchdown. It changes everything. Yep. And both of them are off his fingertips. Yeah. So, sometimes we look at just the 3 for 9, the results of 3 points, and they're looking at film going, that was the right read. Oh, man, if he had to just stem that a little bit more, it would have been perfect. And that's what goes into film work. So I don't think they've lost any confidence in Geno Smith. I think he's proved it throughout camp that he's on his game.
Well, if you weren't able to catch the first preseason game, you can catch it live on Q13 Fox. Let me just give you a quick read of what the lines were for Geno Smith and Paxton Lynch. For Geno, he went 3 of 9 for just 58 yards, no touchdowns. Paxton, he had completed 11 of his 15 attempts, 109 yards, 1 touchdown. He also ran in a touchdown, as you guys mentioned, that his legs were, you could see that when he couldn't find anything, if there was really good coverage, he would get out of the pocket and he would use his legs, which not that Geno didn't, because we saw him do that as well sometimes, but like you're saying, it just seems like it was different for him in the second half. Maybe it was the caliber of player that he was going up against. Maybe it's his former team. He wanted to put on a little something extra for them. I mean, there's so many different factors, but you talk about those deep balls to DK Metcalf. I want to talk about the guy who really made some big old plays out there that we haven't been really talking about during training camp, and that's Jas Ferguson, another really big body player, and he looked awesome out there. He played a lot of the second half with Paxton.
Yeah, I think with him, it all started at Pop Kenny. He kind of came out. He had 2 touchdowns, 2 big plays, and he kept it going here. What I like about him, man, he just uses his frame. If you're that size, you're that big, you have to be able to go up and catch the ball. That's what he did in the red zone. He went up, caught the ball, reached out for a touchdown. But the play that impresses me the most is when he was dragging across the middle of the field. You have to be aware of everything, where the soft spot is in the zone. Sometimes you can lead your quarterback into an interception if you don't slow down and sit in that pocket. And he didn't sit, but he throttled down. He caught the ball. He got a feel, and his hands just look for sure. When a receiver is confident, man, that ball looked like it just sticks to his hand and he tucks it away. There was no bobble in what he was doing. He seemed like a very confident guy, and he's making it even tougher. The wide receiver room is already full of talent, and he wasn't the guy we were talking about. Yeah. Now we're talking about him. Man, it's just this is one of the most exciting camps I've seen when it comes to the wide receiver position. And for years we've talked about, we have small guys, they can't get it done, and all this other stuff. So now we got big guys, we got small guys, we got slot guys, we got downfield guys, we have shifty guys. We have everything you need in that receiver room, and unfortunately, some good ball players are going to get cut. You
can tell that the former wide receiver on our panel right here is just getting hyped right now. Bump, I like it.
I think we're all hyped at what we see. You can't teach size. And Jas Ferguson, I remember when we had our very first this show with a second day of camp, whenever it was, and I said, well, I really like his name, Jas. I think that's pretty cool. And they're 6'5", and the Seahawks have a way of finding guys that don't get drafted but have a skill set that's unique. And this guy ran a 4.45 40 at the combine. He's 6'5". He had some issues at LSU, transferred to a smaller school, maybe didn't get quite the notoriety. This is going to be tough because the coaches do not want to go in with 3 rookies at wide receiver, and maybe 4. Yeah. And there's a chance that 4 rookies outplay the veterans. I mean, you get Jas, you got DK Metcalf. By the way, my point on DK, take the sleeves off. Show your guns. You have a body unlike anybody else. Intimidate those DBs. I'm the kid. We had the long sleeve. I went, he doesn't look that big out there. And he's big. So that's my
Maybe you need to give him some tips. To be like, as a
former
safety.
Think you'll listen?
I think so. I mean, he's a young guy. He's taking it all in, This is what it's for.
I like it. I'm going to grab him after this.
All right, well, you are joining us here on Seahawks Training Camp Live, presented by Safeway. Jackie Montgomery, Paul Moyer, Michael Bumpus, Colin Cole. We're talking about the Seahawks' first preseason game, which happened this past Thursday against the Denver Broncos. Of course, the Seahawks coming out victorious on that. And right now we're talking about the wide receivers, specifically Jas Ferguson, who made a really impressive showing for his skill set and what he can bring this team. But as you guys were saying, this is such a crowded wide receivers room. I think it's 12, maybe 13 guys in that current wide receivers room. Lots of them. So one guy that we didn't talk about that I mean, he only had one catch, but it was a really impressive catch, and that was John Urso across the middle. It almost reminded me of like a Doug Baldwin-esque like catch, and I was really excited for him to make that play. It was on like a 3rd and long, and just what did you guys, I mean, like I said, only one catch, so not a lot to go from stats-wise, but did you see anything that kind of like, ooh, hey, that's a good one?
Well, I like him. You know, I liked him watching some of his stuff in college. That particular play, we mentioned on the postgame show, he did look a little bit like Doug Baldwin, the way he came off the line with his feet. And as he was running full speed, just the way he was reading the defense and how he stemmed away from, I think they were in a zone, it's the way he stemmed away from the guy who was in the seam and again created space for that throw. So he's obviously a smart guy. He's got really good hands. We need a slot receiver, and I think there's a huge battle there. And that's, between probably Jennings, Reynolds. It's going to be tough. But those who can escape and win on 3rd down are going to make the team in that slot spot, and I think he's one of them. I think he's one of them that's got a shot.
Yeah, whenever you can run in the slot, you have to be able to run a seam route. That's when you're inside, you're running off the linebacker, then you're getting straight up to the safety. What he did there, he did a great job of holding the linebacker with his eyes and his body language. And then he gets to the safety, and he's running hard, creating space. He catches the ball and then has the awareness to step back, a guy diving at his feet. When a rookie can put all that together in his first game, it just shows that he's in tune with what's going on around him. He's not just running a play. He's running this route to get open and doing his job, man. I know it was only one catch, but, man, he showed what he showed in that one play was what I saw on his highlight tape at Hawaii. He just kept the party going and again, making it tough in that room.
Yeah, I think just everything that echoes what you guys are talking about, everything when it comes to at the bottom of the route, start of the play, and to the finish. I think the biggest thing for me is once he had the ball in his hands, what he was able to do with it. Just like you said, he was at full speed, and he makes a jump cut, and he allows the defender to kind of fly by him as he maneuvers around that, and he did a great job of that. I think the bigger thing, too, as a rookie in this receiver room, he's going to have to make a lot of plays when it comes to the return game. He's going to have to be a guy that they can lean on, a guy that can kind of set himself apart from the rest of the room to really make this roster. I think, regardless of his draft status, he has a lot of attributes, but then the bigger factor of it is what can he do once he has the ball in his hands. We've already seen what he can do when he catches the ball, how he can make some moves, but the bigger part of that is in the return game, can he be a guy that can be, take over that spot for Lockett? Because obviously Lockett being the player that he is now and being the number one receiver, he obviously won't take as many snaps when it comes to punt return, kick return. So I'm excited to see what he does and how he's able to maintain in the return game, and that more or less will solidify his spot on the roster.
He also has something that we've got a lot of big receivers now.
Yeah.
And even Jennings is not small.
Yeah.
These guys are all over 200 pounds. So we got speed guys. I don't know if we got real quick guys. And in that slot, what I think makes him unique is he has that. I don't think he's going to blow by a guy in a 40. There maybe even catches 130 yards downfield and he gets run down, for 50, which is fine. We'll take that. But his separation in that first few yards is pretty unique. And if he's doing that consistent and Russell Wilson's seeing that, particularly on 3rd down, he'll be a go-to guy. Now, again, we're dependent on a lot of rookies here, which, kind of makes me nervous, but they warrant that opportunity. And it'll be, for John Schneider and Pete, how many rookies do we want to take in that have a chance to be on the field? It's really an unusual year for the Seahawks.
Well, Colin, you brought up special teams and his ability to return, and that was one thing that Coach Carroll talked about as well going into this game. Special teams is something that they focused a lot on when they were drafting guys and as they were making up this roster, this 90-man roster for training camp. What did you see from in special teams? The coverage was awesome, but when you look at the returns also, what did you see? What players did you stood out to you? Because as you mentioned, Tyler Lockett now being that number one receiver, we might not see him on returns. Even though he wants to do it, we might not see him. So we saw Keenan Reynolds back there. We saw David Moore back there. We saw Ugo Amadi for a couple. What did you guys see from the returns? Then we can also go into coverage in a little bit.
So, well, first and foremost, I could see exactly why. I live back east, so I didn't know a whole lot about the punter and kicker situation.
Yeah.
But to see those guys really perform and to see how well our punter placed the ball and really made it really goes unsaid, and I think a lot of people don't really pay a whole lot of attention to it. That is probably the biggest play for a defense coming out on the drive, where that ball is placed and by the punter, and how great of a job he did in doing so. Now shifting gears to the return game, Amadi did a great job, both shifting from defense to returner. I saw him make a lot of plays doing so. And as a returner, you got to be aggressive. You have to be a guy that sees it, hits it, and gets there as fast as you can. I saw Keenan Reynolds do that a couple times early in the game as well. So it's pretty much up in the air, and it's the exact atmosphere that Pete Carroll wants. He wants it to be as competitive as possible so the cream rises to the top. And so I'm excited to see how all these guys play in the next preseason game. But going back to the last one, it was exciting to see those guys get the ball in their hands and get the ball north and south as quickly as they possibly could.
Yeah, I saw Reynolds come out and hit it hard. When you're on a kick return, there's no time to dance. There's no time to think. You have to believe in your scheme and go. And Reynolds did that. And what I liked about Amadi, man, he looked strong with the ball in his hands. He didn't look timid. He didn't look like a scared rookie. He looked like a guy who says, hey, I'm going to make this team in this spot right here. And then you go to punt return with David Moore. He looked really confident. There was a point in the time where he caught the ball. He kind of hesitated a little bit, went right, went left. Whenever a returner can hesitate and slow it down and kind of set up his blocks, which you can do more on a punt return than a kick return, it just shows confidence. And, again, it just shows how talented that room is. I think there are a couple more receivers who can go out there and do some returns as well. I'm sure they're fighting for those positions. So return game is special, man. It's field position. And if you can be explosive in the return game and give your offense some great field position, that sets up our run game even better, give us a short field. It all comes together and, again, competitive in the return game.
Yeah, I read somewhere where somebody, one of the writers, beat writers, said they didn't think Amadi would make the team. And I'm like, man, you're not watching the same thing I'm watching, because, one, he can flat out cover. He'll hit you. He was, the Jim Thorpe best defensive back in the country a year ago at Oregon. Wow. And he's a fantastic returner. And when you brought that up, Colin, I was like, okay, good, because it kind of was unnoticed. It was later in the game, you're going, and all of a sudden it just flashed to me. I go, okay, this guy has something in the return game too. I'd like to see him get more opportunities to see, could he be that guy? And I think he can. So the more you can do as a rookie,
absolutely,
the more valuable you are. And I think Ugo Amadi is one of those guys who can play some safety. You can play the slot. You can play some corner. You can be a return guy. Great special teamer, getting down on the coverage. I would be shocked if he didn't make the team.
Bump, remind me, did you do any returning in your career back in your day?
Yep.
Cole, you were he was shaking his head too that he did that as well.
Yeah. Back in the day, I did some return. Yeah. somewhere along the line. Yeah, somewhere down the line.
I'm just curious. Just give us the perspective from a returner's position. Just you're waiting for this ball to drop. Meanwhile, you have guys just running full speed at you. I mean, even DK, he tweeted, and it was a joke. He was like, that he was doing punt returns for the first time. He's like, pray for me. And that's a big guy. So I can only imagine someone like Tyler's size, or, Ugo's not the biggest guy. You know what I mean? These guys that are back there, when you know that someone's just coming out to just lay you out.
Yeah, someone asked me that question a few years back, and I described it as, it's like that scene in The Lion King where Simba's in the valley and the herd is running at him. It's the same feeling. You feel it. You feel the pressure coming at you, and you're looking up, seeing where the ball is. You're peeking and seeing if your gunners are going to block for you, and you really just have to trust on what's going on in front of you. But the great thing about punt return is you can set up your blocks. Yeah. You have more of an influence on the play in punt return. Okay. In kick return, you're solely relying on your big boys. And back in my day, they could lock hands and block guys. Nowadays, you can't lock up. So it's a little different, but it's definitely a lot of pressure, and it's a stampede running at you. Possession first, or you will get kicked off that team pretty quickly.
Oh my gosh, I think I just dropped the ball and go run the other way or something. It was just
you climb up the little tree.
I climb up the tree the Simba's on and just hold on for dear life. All right, guys. Well, if you're just tuning in, you're hanging out with us here on Seahawks Training Camp Live, presented by Safeway. Another beautiful day here at the Virginia Mason Athletic Center as your Seattle Seahawks are on the field for yet another day of training camp. We're recapping the first preseason game, and when we look at the running game, the lead rusher for the team on Thursday night was Xavier Turner, a guy who was just signed the day before the game took place. They introduced him. Coach Carroll joked that he introduced him to the team after the game because he got there so late. What did you guys see in his debut, not only with this team, but out on the field at CenturyLink Field, the rookie?
Well, I thought it was a great story. I mean, you think about it. I mean, if you read, he was in the airport and coming back from Green Bay or going to Atlanta. I can't remember where, but he was moving around with some teams trying to bring him into camp. And the Seahawks called him while he was at the airport and said, "Hey, can you get off that plane and get to Seattle?" And they got him a flight the next morning out here, and he played, and he was our leading rusher. I think it's a fantastic story, and God bless him. I mean, how hard is that? I mean, the coaches are coaching him on the sideline. The quarterbacks and other running backs are in the huddle are coaching him, and he went out and played well. So, yeah, I mean, it was one of those, I didn't even realize it until after the game. We were doing the post-game show, and we all went, why do they have Malik Turner as the leading rusher? I go, I can't believe he had 13 carries. They didn't even have his name right. So, yeah, great story.
Well, 5'10", 225-pound undrafted rookie out of Tarleton State, guys. 13 attempts.
Quick, where is that?
Huh? No idea.
Come on.
I'm going to say Ohio, and I'm
Google.
just guessing. I have no idea.
Google search it.
Yeah, I don't
That's our producer will come up with that one.
13 attempts for 42 yards. I'm going to turn it to you guys. Bump, Colin, what did you guys see from him?
I saw a little bit of Thomas Rawls in him. He's low to the ground, a little shifty. His strides are a little wide. And I saw a guy who's hungry for a position. He wants to make this team. To be an undrafted free agent, there's so much uncertainty in day to day. I used to sit in my locker every day and be like, well, let's see if I'm here tomorrow. You know, that's just the life of an undrafted rookie. You never know what moves teams are going to make. And I just saw a guy who was hungry, who was coachable, and who just wants a spot on the team, who wants to live out a dream that every kid wants to. I mean, every kid growing up wants to be some kind of athlete. You would think, well, some kids want to be athletes and stuff. So I just saw a hungry guy who took advantage of an opportunity, and that's what you have to do when you're put in that position.
I guess for me, kind of echoing what Bump is saying here, as a guy who's undrafted free agent, they kind of went through that same kind of situation. It's a difficult spot to step into, but you step into it with all the energy in the world, knowing that, and the confidence, knowing that you have the ability to play. It's just getting to know the plays. And ultimately, they showed a lot in terms of, hey, this guy's coachable. Let's put him on the field. Let's see what he can do. And ultimately, you're in a win-win situation because either way, you're going to be on the field. You know the situation, especially after Scarborough went down. He knew the situation was he was the guy that had to carry the load running down the end of the game. So he showed very well that on the field, while they were coaching him up, he's taking the ball and it was back to football. Now, let me just
and that's
run.
all it is.
That's
too,
all.
Man.
That's all it came down to.
You know, they've been playing football a long time, and it's just football. And sometimes, if you simplify it and just let them go out and just play, don't have to think about anything, that's what you get.
Yeah.
Well, and that's what I was going to ask. Is this one of the few positions where you don't necessarily need the playbook because you're using your vision to get down the field, opposed to if you're going in as like a D lineman or as a linebacker or something like that, where you're just like, oh, you need to know what's going on.
There's so many run plays. There's zone, there's power, there's counter, there's stretch. I mean, the only thing that changes really is the formation. Unless I doubt someone revolutionizes a run game and comes up with a play that we haven't seen before. So most running backs, that's why running backs come in the league and are successful early, because there's only so many run plays you can do, and it's really based on just your athletic ability and your vision. And he showed that you can hop off a plane and be a leading rusher in the NFL the next day.
I'm curious how he actually got off the plane. It says he was boarding the plane, because in today's day and age, you get past the agent and they're like, nope, you're on. Sorry, buddy.
Hey.
All right, well, that's an awesome story coming out of the first preseason game. All right, guys, as we kind of look at this preseason game as a whole, I want you to name your one player that really took another step and are really making a showing for this coaching staff that they need to be on this team.
Well, we talked about Jas Ferguson, so
Yeah.
I'll leave that one alone. But I think if he has just if he keeps being consistent, he's going to be a hard guy not to keep on the team, because they're not going to be able to put him through the practice squad.
Yeah.
Someone will pick him up. But for me, it's Marquise Blair. I think he's a guy that they've talked about a lot, that he brings that enforcer attitude, which is hard to do in this day and age.
Yeah.
He got a penalty in the game, which, again, I don't know what to tell him. I thought it was perfect form. He shouldered it. I thought he hit the guy in the chest. Nowadays, again, if you hit him too hard, it is what it is.
I blame that on the crowd, on everyone going, ooh, collectively,
Yeah.
because
It's
he
almost
laid
what?
him out. And it was just one of those shocking plays where, they just have to throw the flag, He gets
Yeah, again, if I was the receivers, I would have went and whooped up on the quarterback for throwing it, but that's another story. Marquise Blair, to me, is a guy that showed exactly why they drafted him. He is a fantastic tackler. He caught Freeman on a swing route, who's, a big back, pretty shifty. He formed him up like he was an all-pro guy. I mean, it was really impressive. He has a feel for the running game. He came off the corner a couple of times. He did one where he blitzed and then they flattened it immediately down the line of scrimmage and made the play. A lot of rookies take 2-3 steps upfield first. They round it off. He played it perfect. So they're going to find a way to get him on the field. I don't know if he starts because of, now we got to move McDougal to free safety because I think Blair's more of a strong safety guy, though he can play free too. But maybe we do some packages where we drop Blair down and we've got 2 traditional safeties behind us and some nickel packages.
I was going to say this last year they did a lot of that big nickel and bringing in the third safety. So do you think
I think that too. The hard part is, you got Kendricks and they like their 3 linebackers that they've talked about keeping them on the field a bunch. But there's no way you can get around Blair. He can cover. He makes plays. He's a thumper. I just think you'll see a lot of different packages, and I think you'll see him with a couple of sacks this year too.
Yeah, I have to go with Ugo Amadi. He was pretty much everywhere. I think he had a pass defended on defense. He had a tackle on defense. He had a tackle on special teams. He had 2 good returns. I think one got called back because of a penalty, but he showed how explosive he can be, and that was his game coming in. He was a good returner. He was going to make plays on defense, and he did exactly what he had to do. I think Colin talked about it earlier. Just take advantage of every opportunity, and I felt like he did exactly that on defense, on special teams, in the return game. Just showed his versatility and just making it harder for these guys, for these coaches to cut him if that's what they're thinking. They're crazy if they're thinking that at this point, but just making decisions tough on coaches. That's what you have to do as a player. Make the decisions tough for the coaches. If you're not making decisions tough for coaches, that means your team isn't going to be very good. That means you don't have many ball players out there, and Ugo is definitely in the conversation right now.
I think one of the biggest questions coming into training camp is where's the pass rush going to come from?
Yeah.
With Clark being gone now to Kansas City, with Jay Reed being out for the first 6 games, where is that pass rush going to come from, and who's going to show up to be those guys to take over that role and fill the spot that those guys are not going to be there for? And I would have to say that it was impressive to watch Jacob Martin come off the edge late in the game. He was a guy that looked like he wasn't making a lot of the sacks per se, but he was getting after the quarterback and making him uncomfortable in the backfield. Between him and Mingo, and Mingo's play on special teams, I can't go without saying how huge his play on special teams was the other night. He made a lot of key plays. And that's a guy that you're expecting to really show up big when it comes to the regular season. And rushing off the edge is going to have to be his forte. I mean, I know he's playing a lot more Sam backer this year as he did last year, but they're going to expect him to step up and get to his natural position of defensive end and really do a lot coming off the edge for him. So I was excited to see what both of those guys were able to do. And Martin, he seemed like he really had another level to his game once that game was winding down the other night.
Curious on both of you guys on this one. This is a little different from Pete and his teams. And the amount of times that we blitz with a safety,
that's what I was just going to ask.
Or a nickel.
You saw Deshaun Shed getting open and have that.
Ugo, Deshaun, you said on that one,
and
he got
safety,
the safety. But we also saw Blair, 3 or 4 times. I'm going to say we blitzed 8 times with nickels, safeties, or some type of hybrid position there. Do you guys see that continuing? It obviously was effective, and it all comes down to do you have the right personnel for it, but just your thoughts on that.
Well, and is that something that they have to do because we don't know where that pass rush is going to come right now?
I think you always put yourself in best position, and a lot of times people kind of consider themselves whether or not it's important to kind of bring a 4-man rush and deploy 7 into coverage. If you have that ability to always put 4 down and get after the quarterback, that's great. But ultimately, you have to kind of find places to pick and choose where you want to bring that pressure from. And like we were saying just a second ago, to bring the safety blitz there and get that safety, that's huge. And I think that those guys are going to be important hybrid guys that are playing in that box and kind of. I know we talked about Kendrick staying on the field along with the other 2 linebackers a lot of the time. You got to consider that sometimes you got to take a defensive lineman off the field, especially if they're not getting it done up front. But I definitely see this group as a group that will be sneaky in terms of getting after the quarterback and getting sacked. So I'm excited to see the group as a whole just continue to grow and continue to get better in that respect.
I think they are going to blitz more. I think it's all about personnel. Do you have the guys to do it? Deshaun Shedd showed he can do it. Blair showed he can do it. They put it on film, so now the coaches are going to go back and just see how effective they are. They were effective blitzing in the first preseason game, so why not do it? Why not grow? It's all about what the defense can handle. If they feel like they have guys who are smart on the line, who are smart blitzing from deep, they can handle it, then they're going to do it. If they can't handle it, they won't do it, and I think they showed that it can be a real big part of the game this year.
Do you think that this is going to be kind of something that we see just because with Ken Norton being back as a defensive coordinator, obviously just going into his second year as a D coordinator with this team, is that going to be his kind of new stamp on this defense?
Well, this is Pete's defense.
Yeah.
And the one thing, Pete will let you coach, but there's a philosophy too to what he does, and he's always been a single free, more zone guy in the past. But the game's changed. I mean, it's hard to do that now. Particularly with the rules that are set in place, and so I think you have to find a way to get after the quarterback and still not give up zero coverage. I mean, no one in the free safety middle of the field. They're putting too much pressure on the corners there. But I liked what I saw because some of it was zone blitzes where we sent 5 guys, but we dropped back underneath, and actually there was a couple of matchup man on one side, zone on the other. So they're doing some calculated, all right, if they find this, we'll give it up, we'll rally, we'll make the tackle. But if they don't, we got a big play. So I think you're seeing a little change in philosophy for Pete's teams.
All right, well, that is going to do it for us here at Seahawks Training Camp Live, presented by Safeway. The Seahawks now have a full week to prepare for their next preseason game. That's going to take place a week from today in Minnesota against the Vikings. And we'll be excited to see kind of what new faces emerge from that game, what sort of things that they try to, new rotations, new bodies. It's all a lot to take in and really exciting to watch. But before we get there, make sure you tune back here on Seahawks.com for more Seahawks Training Camp Live presented by Safeway. We'll be back tomorrow. You have a great day and go Hawks.